He is an avid Pelotoner. He loves dad jokes. He is Jesse Kurtz, executive producer of the Mountain West Network, and he joins me today to tell his story. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor at Fox Sports Radio, volleyball broadcaster, tennis broadcaster for the USTA. This is going to be a lot of fun. The On to Something podcast with Jesse to tell his story. I know, Jesse, you're someone who doesn't like to be the story. Part of your morals as a storyteller, the last thing you want to do is be the face. But we're going to turn things around here because it's time for you to get that deserved recognition. And you are the story in this conversation. So we're going to have a lot of fun here. Jesse, I wanted to start here as I welcome you in. You mentioned, and I've listened to a lot of interviews where you've talked about how it's so important to, in order to expand in this business, to not be somebody by the script and expect everything to go by the script. When you look at your career as a whole, how has not going by the script and being okay with that, being adaptive, how has that ultimately led you to where you are today?
That's a great question. First of all, thank you for having me on. There's no greater honor than someone taking interest in who you are personally and professionally. It is a little bit uncomfortable being on this side, but yes. I do appreciate you taking an interest. It's funny because my professional life for a long time did go according to script. There were times when, as a kid, my parents had video of this, of me holding a microphone when I was 5, 6 years old saying, "Hi, this is Jesse Kurtz. I'm at the Broncos game, working for Channel 4. Like, I would mimic these things. So at a young age, this is what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was work in local news, and got that chance and climbed the ranks through Sioux City, Iowa, and Colorado Springs and Denver. And it was an incredible ride. And then in 2012, I was a father of a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and all of a sudden the local news thing maybe wasn't working out the way that I had thought because of the schedule. Loved my job, every moment of it. But as you well know, coming in local, working at a 10:30 newscast, getting home at midnight, having young kids, like, it started not to jive. And I said, man, we're going to have to go off script here. And I was lucky enough to get a job in college athletics, still doing broadcasting. And I had some opportunities along the way where, because of things that I had not planned for, my father passing away in 2008 being one of them, that I had to bail on some opportunities that I always thought that's where I'm headed. But I'm so grateful for those roads not taken, because it's put me, right where I am right now, and working in the Air Force broadcast radio booth for 10 years. Never in a million years did I ever think that I would get into radio, but that's a part of me that I love, that I'm proud of, and an opportunity that I never saw coming on this path that I set for myself when I was like 5 years old. So there are many opportunities that I passed on, and I'm so grateful that I did.
One of the things, when you talk about your source of pride, has to be how many people you have worked with, Jesse, who have gone on to succeed in this business. And I think that at the core of this conversation, it needs to be highlighted as to what you have done to mentor others. It's one thing to look at a tape. It's one thing to get an email back and provide some feedback. But from conversations I've had, it's so important to you. And in an ego-driven business, there's not much ego in what you do because you're so giving with your time and how you built up others. One of those people is Stormy Bonatoni, and someone who I've had on this conversation, and she spoke so highly of you. How much credit are you taking for her success?
None. And I mean that wholeheartedly. In this business, Bryan, you can't fake it. Either you've got the drive and you got the talent, or you don't. And you need people along the way to kind of coach you through things. But either you're going to make it or you're not. And Stormy came out of school to our office wide-eyed and with an open mind. And she soaked everything in that we threw at her. She failed a lot, which, as I've come to know as a professional and as a father, that's the best way to learn. If you're not failing, you're not growing. And she failed a lot, but she learned from those and never, ever had a bad attitude about those failures. It was always, okay, what can we learn from this? Came to work every day with a smile, with an appetite for getting better. And that'll take you so many places. I mean, there's so many times that we come across folks that feel like they're entitled, right?
Yeah.
That they think because of, where they came from, or because they played this, or because they've already worked here, that they should be the next in line for a job or an opportunity. Stormy never was that. And those who come to work for us, we look for that attitude first. So to see her now as a national sideline reporter for ESPN College Football each and every week, big games, just was on the sideline for the number 2 team in the country. It brings me a great deal of happiness to see her do this, because I know she wanted that. I know she worked very hard for that. So the credit is all hers. She made the most of every opportunity that she had and did it with a smile and graciousness. So no credit to Jessie Kurtz, 100% to Stormy Buonantony.
Jessie Kurtz is with us. Well said. Although I think you're just being a little bit humble there. And I think that if I asked her that question, I don't think she would use the 0. I think she would definitely have a number there, and it would be a big number. Speaking of numbers, 4 Emmys Jessie Kurtz has won. You can see some of them behind him. And we mentioned that, yes, executive producer, Mountain West Network, also a color analyst for the radio network at Air Force. And how has working radio, Jessie, allowed you to channel in a different side of being a storyteller?
Being prepared for the unexpected. You never know in a game. I mean, it's my job to take something, some massive concept, just take one play. There's so many moving parts, and fit that into 10 seconds. And sometimes it may be 5 seconds. And sometimes it's just shutting up because of a team running a hurry up offense or something. The play-by-play guy I work with, Jim Arthur, is one of the best in the country. I truly do look forward every Saturday to get a chance to work alongside him and learn from him. But my window then sometimes is 20 seconds, sometimes is 5 seconds. So thinking off script, being very calculated in what you say, has made me a better broadcaster, because there is no script. You don't know what's coming, and you don't know what is coming up next. Things just happened or already seem like they're an hour in the past. So just always thinking on your toes has really challenged me professionally in ways that I never thought, because I was a studio host for so long. Right? You write it, you read it off the prompter. You may think off script a little bit, but we do a 2-hour pregame show, 3.5-hour in-game broadcast, and an hour post-game. No script, no teleprompter, and it's just go, which is quite exhilarating every weekend.
In that conversation you had recently, speaking of exhilaration, going off script, you chatted with Bridget Howard, and you talked about the 4 C's. Mm-hmm. Clear, concise, correct, and conversational, and how that is so important, especially when it comes to, like, let's say a sideline hit. And as you mentioned, when you're trying to say something as far as color for an Air Force broadcast, if they're going up tempo, you have this little finite amount of time where you're able to say things. So when you got to your first opportunity as far as is on air in Sioux Falls, right?
Sioux City. Sorry. An hour south of Sioux Falls. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So when you got there, what was your 10 to 20 seconds concise pitch to them, or as to why they brought you on?
They brought me on because I was an intern the summer before. I went out there to learn. So, but there was still a pitch, right? There was still I'm your guy for the job. And the reason that I think I got that job was I was interested in telling stories, regardless if it was the 14-year-old freshman on the girls basketball team or the starting running back at the University of Nebraska. The plan is still the same. The plan of attack doesn't change, right? It's learn who the person is, learn what makes them tick. What are those small things that make them unique, that people need to know about. And my passion for, regardless of who the subject is or how big of a moment they may be in, as far as what sport they play or what level, my approach was always the same. And the sports director that I worked for, Tim Seaman, who is one of my great mentors in this business, an Iowa broadcaster Hall of Famer, told me that I got the job because of storytelling. There were probably guys and girls who were better on air, maybe had bigger personalities, better voices, but it was the attention to detail and the passion that I had to find out what made each individual person who they are within, the sporting environment, that I think set me apart. And I do love telling people stories, just like you're doing a tremendous job with this. I just like learning what make people tick, because that makes me a better person, right?
Yeah, no question about it. Jesse Kurtz is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. Speaking of mentors, your dad was always a mentor for you. When you share his story with others, what comes to mind?
Boy, so I'm in this business primarily because of him. My dad was he worked on the railroad. We had season tickets to Denver Bronco games. My mom still has season tickets, and every Sunday we would go as a family to the Broncos game. And he and I would sit with our Walkmans on, with AM, FM radios, and tune into the play-by-play folks. And it was early on that I grew a passion for the storytellers of the game while you're watching the game. And he told me at a young age, you could do this. This is something that you could do. You love talking. You love telling stories, and what you did that day. It was always exciting for you to explain things. This could be something that you could do. And from an early age, because of that, I always thought that this might be the road that I go on. And he was encouraging. He helped me financially when I was a local reporter making zero money. He and my mom were very supportive in that role to help me get at least on my feet. And I'll be honest, every time I get in a booth and put the headphones on for a game, there's not a moment that doesn't go by pregame that I don't think that my dad's listening, because I can sit there in the fifth deck in the northeast end zone at Old Mile High and picture watching John Elway and Terrell Davis and listening to the stories, and then my dad and I talking about it after the game of, did you hear what he said here? Did you hear what happened there? So he had a profound impact, and still has a profound impact on the way that I tell stories, and the emotion that I have in a broadcast booth. It's predominantly because of he and my mom.
The unimaginable impact that he has had on you, and it has today. And I listened to how you said it. He was the first to believe in me and know that I could do this. How important it is to have people in our corner that support us and believe in our dreams, because oftentimes they see something in ourselves that we don't see right away. Speaking of storytelling with your dad, what stories has he told you over the years about working on the railroad?
Boy, it's tough business. And the railroad business was a family business. My grandfather was in it, my uncles were in it, and my dad worked extremely hard. I mean, it's hard work, where he would get up in the middle of the night. He'd get the call, train's ready, got to go south, and 3 a.m. puts on the overalls, grabs his lunch that was pre-made, and goes to work. And we would see him maybe 24 hours later when he returned. But all of those things that he did were for my brother and I, and for my mom to continue to put food on the table and give us the necessary things that we need to be successful. And there were many a times that my father said, please, under no circumstances, get into this business, the family business, right? They thought that he wanted something better, didn't want us to be getting up in the middle of the night, wanted us to be there for games. My dad made a lot of our games growing up and was there for everything, but his job called on him. And there were times where he'd come, soot and dirty, but it was all something that he did to make sure that he provided for us. And that's something that is important to me now as a father of two, to make sure that I'm not only working hard to give my kids and my wife the life that they deserve, but also show them that it does take hard work. You have to be dedicated as a professional and as a father and a husband to really set that prime example so that maybe they can follow the same when they're older.
What a loving message for your father. No matter what he had done at work, like you said, soot and dirty, he would show up, he would be there.
Yeah.
And from a metaphorical comparison, what was initially when you were getting in that image of you being, full of soot and dirty, where you are knowing that, look, the early start, it's not going to be easy, and you are going to be toiling, and you're going to be trudging, and you're going to be fighting?
I'll tell you that the moment that I said, man, I do love what I do, and there's some that probably aren't going to understand, was early in my career in Sioux City. So weekend, of course, you're responsible for shooting and editing all the video that makes show. There was a wrestling tournament in Spencer, Iowa, and obviously wrestling very important in Iowa. And it was a high school wrestling tournament that started late morning. And I said, we should probably have some video of, some of these wrestlers that are going to make state. And that was a 2-hour drive. So I took some gear home with me that night. At 8 o'clock, got up, drove to Spencer, Iowa, shot, a couple matches for about an hour or whatever, and then drove back, hit a few other things along the way. I believe there were a couple of basketball games, and then started my day of working on my 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 10 o'clock newscast. And I loved every minute of it. I mean, you start early, you drive a round trip 4 or 5 hours to make sure that you have the best content from your viewers, because they deserve that. But it's like, man, it's a long day. It's a lot of driving. But what a life I have. What a job I have that they're paying me to be at sporting events. It blew my mind. And at that point, I knew this is the job for me, because I've never worked a day in my life. I mean, I've had some challenging days, but really have enjoyed the driving 2 hours to a wrestling match, or getting a chance to call an Air Force bowl win over Washington State in Phoenix a couple of years ago. It's all the same to me. And that's when I knew that all the soot and all that on me was the time that you have to put into the job to make it worth it for the viewers that are going to invest their time in you. I knew that it wasn't a bother to me, and this was the profession for me.
Jesse Kurtz is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. It is those early stages that can allow and make some get pessimistic or jaded about the business, or obviously agitated and frustrated, and feel like, there's this level of being a cynical mindset to things. Why have you never seemingly gone down that road? All I see from you is hope, faith, optimism, building up others, when it's so easy to take on the grind and make it such a deflating part of our mindset, especially when you're getting started. But how are you able to overcome that mentally? And then not only that, but to not be pessimistic, but from all that you've done, uplift others.
Well, a couple reasons. One, because that's the way I was brought up in this business. I had folks that were very positive in my rise and helping me along the way. So there's no reason, one, for me to do that. Two, I don't, that's not the way that I was taught. So I don't know that. But I think overall, the biggest reason is we're talking about sports. I mean, what's there to be jaded about? What's there to be upset about? Are there frustrations along the way? Sure. But my goodness, like we're not operating, we're not, doing something at a level where, there's life and death involved. This is sports. And to have an opportunity to do this for a living, there's no better way to do this than be positive. And then I'd say the other reason is I just got to have a support system that helps me. My wife is great. She understands my schedule is crazy. She understands there's some things I'm not going to be around on because I have a game to be at or what have you. And she's always let me do my thing. My mom has been super supportive in making sure that I had the tools necessary to succeed. So to pass that along, and I think that's the best way to succeed and make your rise, is make sure you're making positive impacts on other people, like Stormy is, which makes me more proud than anything with her rise. It's just paying it forward the way that I was brought up in the business and the way that I think that you can make the biggest impact. Is just make sure you bet on yourself, believe in yourself, and stay positive.
Thanks to your wife, you are a father. How has being a dad changed, altered, impacted your perspective, your mindset as a storyteller?
I ask better questions because when you have kids, you have to be honest with yourself and honest with your kids, and making sure that you get to the root of what is, what's bothering them, what's making them excited. I'm probably a lot more emotional than I was when my wife would say early on, I didn't have an emotional bone in my body. But you start understanding perspective in life. It's not all about, the path that you set out for yourself. There are other people involved. And to see my kids succeed and maybe not take the road that I thought was best for me, and you take the road that is better for them. That perspective is pretty powerful. And that goes for everything. Take the broadcast profession out of it. Understanding that it's not all about you. And in a lot of ways, it's more about others. And having kids, it's certainly important to put them first. And it's amazing that how that then makes you feel when you put them first and you see them succeed. It's much better than any success that you could feel personally. And to see them achieve at such a high level in academics, with National Honor Society or in sports, winning state in things and scoring their first bucket in a middle school basketball game. Those are moments that 20-year-old Jesse Kurtz would have said, but being on national television would be awesome. It pales in comparison to see your son score a bucket in a middle school basketball game.
Well, here I see this theme of you celebrating other successes, whether it's your family or those you work with and you are connected with in this business. As far as the emotional aspect of a storyteller, and obviously you're supposed to be impartial, and there's this element of you being a storyteller and not when you're telling the story to make it about you, but where has the story and the content of the piece that you're putting together, because we are humans and we impact what we see from an emotional standpoint, when were you most overcome with an emotion by a piece that you did where the human element took over and you've never been more affected personally for one reason or another by a certain content, a certain story?
I'll give you two examples. And one was about 10 years ago. I was working in local television in Colorado and had learned about a kid that was playing high school football. I said, you got to see this kid. So made a phone call up and said, I'd like to come to practice the whole bit. So I went up there. His name was Nikolai Lorette. And Nikolai was playing high school football and was a double amputee. No legs, was playing with two prosthetics. He had, 2 steel legs. And this kid was competing his heart out in ways that no one else on the field could match. And at that point, you can't help but, be touched and say, man, this kid is up against every single odd in his life, and he's plowing through it. And to talk to him and his mother about playing football and what it means to him, that was pretty emotional to see that and see mom. This kid was also a Russian orphan that was brought over to the States. So all of those things rolled into one, really made me emotional talking to him, but then putting together his story. And you want to make sure that you hit it just right? Because there's a responsibility that you have to make sure that you're true to him, because it's his story and his mom's story. to have that trust to tell that story was pretty powerful and pretty emotional. And then recently, about a year and a half ago, there's a pair of grandmas. They're called the show grandmas now, at San Diego State. And these two ladies kind of integrated themselves into the show, which, as you probably know, is a ruckus fan group. They're very, very active in trying to get under the skin of opponents. These two integrated themselves into a very, very rowdy bunch, and they were welcomed in. And the backstory with one of them, Layla McCoy, is she had lost a special needs child in an accident about 10 years before that, and basketball had helped heal her. These kids that brought her in helped heal her. It's become part of who she is. So to sit down and talk to her and understand how important these kids now are to her in the game of basketball, to her mental health in her mid-70s, was pretty powerful. And for her to trust and open up, her heart and kind of her backstory to all of this was a level of trust that I don't take lightly. When we ultimately went with the story and posted it, for her to say, "You nailed his story. You nailed my son's story. You beautifully told this." That was a pretty powerful moment as well.
I can't think of a more rewarding experience for you, and how moments like that bring so much meaning to what you do. As someone who tells the stories of others, who celebrates the successes of others, that's who you are at your core. When do you allow you to celebrate your success?
There are moments privately that I'll be in the car and you're driving to work and you say, "You know what? You've made a lot of good decisions." And I do have those. I think it's important you do have those, that you have those moments of self-reflection of, okay, where am I at? Am I doing everything that I wanted to do, that I'm capable of achieving? And privately, there are times where I'm driving down the hill and I'm looking at Pikes Peak that's got snow on it and say, "Man, what a life right now." I live in my home state, a wonderful state, no place I'd rather be, have healthy kids, a tremendous wife, a mother that supports me. I've got a roof over my head, a job that I love. There are many times where you give yourself a little pat on the back and say you're doing well. But you come around the corner and then there's another challenge. And if you're able to get over that hurdle, plow through that barrier, whatever the case may be, that there comes another moment of self-reflection. But if I'm being honest, I do that quite often because I think it's important we live in such a fast-paced world, to take a step back and say, things are pretty good. Things are pretty good. That's pretty powerful. And if you're not doing that, it's very easy to get in over your skis and start worrying about all the things that aren't going right, instead of taking a step back and saying, "Man, there's a lot that is going right."
Jesse Kurtz is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. You have such a track record of overcoming obstacles, and you talk about major decisions you've made. You've really hit on so many so well, which is in large part contributing to the success that you've had in your career. I want to leave you with this last question. I see behind you some of your Emmys. You've won 4 Emmys, and we talk about how, as humble as you are, from a private standpoint and self-reflection, that is when you are going to be able to look back and say, "Man, I've done a lot. I'm happy," and all I hear from you is gratitude. So, if you were to get a conversation with your father, one more, and you were to show him the 4 Emmys, what would he tell you?
I told you.
Wow.
I there was nobody that bet on Jesse Kurtz more than my dad. I mean, he knew from the beginning that this was the path and where I could be successful. My first Edward R. Murrow Award I gave to him before he died, and he broke down. and that meant a lot to me. I gave my first Emmy to my mom, and it still sits in her home. But he would say, "I told you so," and he would be clearly super proud, and it would be emotional. But for him to know that, and I know in my heart that he knows that this was the path, professionally, personally, to be, what we're doing right now and the priorities that we have as a family, and what my family allows me to do on a weekly basis, from a job standpoint. He would say, "I knew this was something that you could do. I knew that people would recognize that," and super proud. And as I said, every time on a weekend when we put the headset on and we kick the ball off Air Force football, I know he's listening, and I'm pretty positive he's super proud, and that means more to me than anything in this world.
From a young Jesse Kurtz putting on the headset with his dad, sitting together at Denver football games, to now what you've done today, he is beaming with pride. And like you said, he always knew. And for you, there must just be this amazing sense of pride internally to know that your dad was always right, and that you continue to carry on his message and his legacy by the work you are doing currently. Jesse Kurtz with Air Force football, part of their broadcast team, the Mountain West Network. I'm Bryan Fenley. This was so much fun. Jesse, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, Bryan, I appreciate that. You touched on some things there that I don't know that I was quite ready for, but I'm glad you did, because there are a lot of underlying reasons that I do what I do, and I'm proud of what I do, and that means a lot that you had some interest, and I really appreciate the conversation.